Michael was standing in the middle of my living room, holding his phone like evidence at a murder trial. His face was the particular shade of red I hadn't seen since he was 14, and I found his report card hidden under the kitchen sink. He turned the screen toward me without a word. The building chat. 123 unread messages. At the very top, sent at 8:47 that morning, a photograph of a blue sedan parked directly in front of the fire exit with the caption, Day 3, Car K447 continues to ignore posted signage. I am proposing a neighborhood tribunal to address this matter formally. Attendance encouraged. Dress code, neighborly. Sent by Dorothy_homeowner. Mom, what is this? I'm solving the parking problem. You called it a tribunal. A neighborhood tribunal. It's friendlier than just tribunal. There are 123 messages in here. People are very engaged in the mornings. That's good for community cohesion. Community? Mom, where did you even learn the word cohesion? Michael, I spent 32 years reading corporate reports. That word appeared on approximately every third page. He sat down on the couch, slowly, the way people sit when their legs stop cooperating. 3 months ago, he said, very quietly, I gave you the Wi-Fi password. Yes. I thought you'd watch cooking videos. I do watch cooking videos. I also manage the building a little. My name is Dorothy Harper. I'm 68 years old. For 32 years, I was the chief accountant at Hargrove Construction. I spent 3 decades reading what other people didn't bother to read, finding the numbers that didn't add up, and having conversations with tax inspectors and contractors and boards of directors that nobody else wanted to have. 3 years ago, my husband passed. 1 year ago, my son Michael and his wife Christina moved into my house. Temporarily, he said, just until they found something. Michael works in corporate PR. He builds reputations for a living. He manages communications. He is, professionally speaking, a man who understands how people talk to each other. And 90 days ago, at a backyard barbecue in front of 4 of his colleagues, he told them his mother was socially awkward and didn't really understand modern communication. He handed me the Wi-Fi password himself. That was his mistake. But first, how we got here. Mom, I live in this building. These people know me. I'm going to get in the elevator tomorrow and see whoever owns that car. I know. That's why I said tribunal and didn't mention the apartment number. I was being tactful. Tactful. He looked at the ceiling for a long moment. The word tribunal appeared 104 times in the replies. People are organizing shifts. Oh, that wasn't me. That was Gerald from the 5th floor. He has a lot of feelings about the parking situation. I just gave him a platform. Michael put the phone face down on the coffee table. He didn't say anything for a while. Outside, a car alarm went off. We both listened to it. That might be K447, I said helpfully. He got up and went to bed at 9:15 in the evening. 3 months earlier, this house was quiet in the way it had been quiet for 3 years, since Harold died and I learned how to be a person who lives alone. It wasn't a sad quiet, it was just mine. I knew which floorboards creaked, which radiator knocked at 2 in the morning, which neighbor's dog barked on Thursdays for reasons nobody had ever identified. I had my books and my garden and my neighbor Martha across the street, who came over on Wednesdays for tea and strong opinions about other people's landscaping. I had enough. Michael and Christina arrived on a Saturday in November with 4 carloads of boxes and a plan to just stay for a few months. Christina had found a small water leak in their apartment. Nothing serious, but the landlord isn't responding, and it's making the walls damp. and rather than dealing with it, they had decided that my guest room was a perfectly reasonable solution. The guest room that had been Harold's study until 3 years ago, and which I had finally gotten around to making peaceful, with a reading chair and the quilt his mother made, and a lamp that gave off the kind of light you could actually see by. I said yes, of course. He's my son. The first month was fine. We moved around each other politely. Christina cooked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Michael fixed the sticky kitchen drawer that Harold and I had been ignoring for 11 years. We watched television in the evenings, the three of us, which was strange, and then comfortable, and then strange again. It was not unpleasant. It was just different. The second month, things began to shift in ways that were so small I told myself I was imagining them. Christina rearranged the kitchen. Not dramatically. She moved the mugs to a different cabinet, put the cutting boards in a drawer, shifted the spice rack from the counter to a shelf above the stove. When I mentioned it, she looked at me with the warmly concerned expression of someone who has decided you are fragile. I just thought it might be more functional. The old layout was a little dated. It was my layout, I said. I put things where I can reach them. Of course, she said, already moving towards something else. I'll put it back if you want. She didn't put it back. The third month, it was the living room. She moved Harold's photograph, the one of the two of us at the Grand Canyon in 1991, which had sat on the bookshelf for 30 years, to a smaller shelf in the hallway. Just to open up the space, she said, the living room felt cluttered. She said it in the cheerful voice of someone doing me a favor. I moved it back. The next day, it was in the hallway again. I stopped moving it back. What I told myself, they're young, they have their own aesthetics, it's not worth a fight over a photograph. What I didn't tell myself, that I was watching my house become theirs, piece by piece, while I stood in it and said nothing, and that this was somehow happening faster than I had noticed it starting. The barbecue was Michael's idea. 4 colleagues from work, a Saturday afternoon, the backyard that I had spent 3 weekends that spring getting ready. I made 2 salads and a potato dish that Harold's sister used to bring to every gathering and that I have never once made badly in 40 years. I put them on the table. I went back inside for the lemonade. Through the kitchen window, I could hear them. Michael and 4 young people who talked the way PR people talk, which is like everything is both effortless and extremely deliberate. They were discussing a client, something about a crisis communication strategy. Someone said optics. Someone said narrative control. They laughed. I came out with the lemonade and a woman named Sophie, blonde, perhaps 28, the kind of effortlessly organized person who has a system for everything, looked up and said, "Oh, is this your mom?" "That's her," Michael said. He had the specific expression he gets when he's about to describe something and wants to control how it lands. "Mom, these are my colleagues, Sophie, Ryan, Danny, and Josh." I said hello. "She lives here?" Ryan asked. He meant it as small talk. "She does," Michael said. "We're staying with her for a while." He paused for just a moment, the pause of someone choosing words. "She's great. She just, she's a bit socially awkward, honestly. Not really her world, the whole modern communication thing. Better in person." Sophie made a sympathetic sound, the kind people make about someone's elderly relative who doesn't know how email works. Christina, who was refilling her glass nearby, added, "We're helping her adjust. It's a process." She said it with great warmth, the warmth of someone describing a project they are generously undertaking. I was holding the lemonade pitcher. I was 68 years old, and I had negotiated contracts with construction firms that tried to underpay their workers, had found $22,000 in accounting errors that saved a company from an audit, had spoken in front of a board of 18 people and convinced them to change their pension structure, and had done all of this in a world where communication meant picking up the phone and making someone understand something they didn't want to understand. Where should I put this? Just on the table, Mom, thanks. I put the lemonade on the table. I went inside. I stood at the kitchen counter for approximately 2 minutes. Then I went back out and sat with them for the rest of the afternoon, and I was pleasant, and I listened to them discuss narrative strategy, and I said nothing of any consequence. That night, I lay in bed and thought about the word adjusting. I was not adjusting to anything. I had lived in this house for 31 years. I had raised my son in these rooms. I had carried Harold's things to donation boxes from these rooms. I had reorganized the kitchen exactly as I wanted it and put photographs where I wanted them and built a life that fit me like something tailored. I thought about Michael's job, his actual job. He was paid, well paid, to understand how groups of people communicated, how to shape perception, how to build relationships that functioned. He was, professionally speaking, someone who studied the mechanics of human connection. And he thought his mother didn't understand how modern communication worked? I stared at the ceiling for a while. Then I asked him for the Wi-Fi password. He gave it to me the next morning over coffee, the way you give a child something you're not sure they should have, but can't find a reason to refuse. He wrote it on a Post-it note in large letters. He explained what Wi-Fi was, briefly. I let him. There's a building chat, he said, as an afterthought, for the residents. I'll add you. Just don't post too much. People are busy. Of course. Like, really, it's mostly for emergencies, lost packages, that kind of thing. I understand. He added me to the chat. He went to work. I sat down with my phone and spent the next 3 hours reading 847 messages from the previous 6 months. I read about the water pressure issue on the second floor that had been raised 4 times and never resolved. I read about the parking dispute that had begun in February with a polite note and escalated by April into something resembling a Cold War, with 2 parties refusing to acknowledge each other's messages. I read about the mystery smell in the 3rd floor hallway that someone had described as philosophical and which had never been identified. I read about a petition for a community bulletin board that had received 11 signatures and then simply stopped being discussed. I read the posts of Gerald from apartment 514, who had strong feelings about almost everything and expressed them at length, usually at 11 in the evening. I made a cup of tea. I found the building's management company contact information, posted at the top of the chat, and not updated since 2019. I looked up whether that company was still operating. It was not. I found the current management company's contact information. I wrote it down. Then I wrote my first message to the group. Good morning, I'm Dorothy. I've lived in this building for 7 years. I noticed the water pressure question has been raised several times without resolution. I found the current management company contact, the one listed in the chat, closed in 2021. Here's the updated number if it's useful. Also, does anyone know the status of the parking issue from February? I want to make sure I understand the situation before I accidentally make it worse. I press send. I went to make another cup of tea. By the time I came back, there were 14 replies. I hadn't posted too much. I had posted exactly once. but I had read 847 messages first, and that, it turned out, was the difference. The water pressure issue was resolved in 4 days. I called the management company using the number I'd found. A woman named Patricia answered on the second ring. I explained the situation clearly, the dates the problem had been reported, the apartment numbers involved, the relevant clause in the building maintenance agreement that I had located in a PDF on the City Housing Authority website. Patricia said she'd send someone on Thursday. Someone came on Thursday. The pressure was fixed by Friday afternoon. When I posted an update in the chat, water pressure on second floor has been repaired. Management company contact is now saved in my phone if anyone needs it in future. Gerald from 514 replied within 4 minutes. Dorothy, you are an actual hero. He used capital letters for the whole sentence. I was not sure if this was emphasis or if Gerald always typed like that. I would learn in time that Gerald typed like that approximately 40% of the time, and the other 60% he typed in very small letters with no punctuation, which I eventually understood corresponded to different emotional states. A woman named Ella from apartment 302 sent me a private message. Dorothy, how did you find the management company so fast? We've been trying to get someone to respond for 8 months. I read the terms of the maintenance agreement and found the company registration number, then searched the Housing Authority database. It took about 20 minutes. A long pause. 20 minutes. The information was public. It just required reading something that most people don't read. Another pause. My name is Ella. I have a dachshund named Precedent. I think we should be friends. I did not yet know that Ella and Precedent would become the most important strategic alliance of the next 3 months. At the time, I just thought, a dachshund named Precedent? Harold would have loved that. 3 weeks in, I discovered the dog owner's chat. I did not discover it on purpose. Gerald had sent me a link to what he said was the Extended Building Community Group, and I clicked it and found myself in a chat of 41 people who were primarily discussing the emotional well-being of their animals and sharing photographs of them on the elevator security camera footage, which apparently someone had worked out how to access, and which showed dogs looking very serious and purposeful in a way that humans never manage in elevators. I did not have a dog. I had a houseplant named Gerald, which I had named before I met Gerald from 514, and which was now a source of some private confusion. I stayed in the chat anyway. On the second day, I asked, I don't have a dog, but I was wondering, is there a designated area for walking them in the building? I keep seeing people go out the side entrance, and I wasn't sure if that was the official route or just a pattern that developed. The chat produced 11 replies in 15 minutes. It turned out there was a designated area, around the side of the building, near the parking, but the gate had been broken for 3 months, and everyone had simply been walking the long way around without mentioning it to management. I called Patricia at the management company. The gate was fixed in 6 days. Gerald from 514 sent me a voice message that was mostly just the sound of him being very moved about the gate. I also organized a vote for most photogenic dog of Building 14, because it seemed like something the group would enjoy, and because I had noticed that positive engagement increased willingness to participate in practical discussions. 17 dogs were nominated. Ella's dachshund Precedent won with 11 votes. His campaign photo showed him sitting in the elevator looking extremely judicial. It was an excellent photograph. He deserved to win. When I posted the results, Ella replied with a photograph of Precedent wearing what appeared to be a small ceremonial collar. He wants to give a speech, she wrote. I told him this wasn't that kind of election. He disagrees. I was beginning to really like Ella. The car incident happened at the end of the second month. A blue sedan, license plate K447, had been parking in front of the fire exit for approximately 3 weeks. It had been mentioned in the chat twice, politely the first time, somewhat less politely the second time, and both times nothing had happened. The fire department's non-emergency line had been called and had not called back. I photographed the car on a Monday morning and posted it with the caption, Day 1. K447 continues to demonstrate creative approaches to parking regulations. Updates to follow. Gerald replied immediately, Dorothy, yes. On day 2, I posted, Day 2. K447 has not moved. However, I notice it has been washed, which suggests the owner is engaged with the vehicle's welfare, if not its location. On day 3, I posted the photograph Michael had seen, with the tribunal caption. By 9 in the morning, there were 123 replies. Gerald had drafted what he called preliminary charges. A woman named Susan from the second floor had suggested a sign-up sheet for people who wanted to submit written testimony. A man named David from 407, who turned out to be the owner of K447, posted, Oh, God, that's my car. I'm so sorry. Moving it now. Please tell Gerald I will cooperate fully with any proceedings. The car was moved within 11 minutes. I posted, Crisis resolved. K447 has relocated voluntarily. The tribunal is adjourned indefinitely. Thank you all for your civic engagement. David from 407 has demonstrated the highest possible level of community responsiveness and deserves our respect. Gerald, mercy and justice both. David from 407, I'm framing this. This was the morning Michael came downstairs with the red face and the phone held like evidence. The thing about the Easy Phone, I should explain the Easy Phone. 2 weeks before the barbecue, Christina had left a box on my bedside table. Easy Phone Prime for seniors. Large buttons, bright screen, a red button on the back labeled SOS that would call emergency services if pressed 3 times. She presented it with the particular warmth of someone who has decided they are being very helpful. We thought you'd find it easier, she said. Bigger display, simpler interface, and the emergency button is right there if you ever need it. I looked at the phone. I looked at my actual phone, which I had owned for 2 years and which I used without any difficulty whatsoever. That's very thoughtful, I said. We just want you to feel comfortable, she said. The box sat on my bedside table, unopened, for 6 weeks. I looked at it sometimes. I thought about the 32 years I had spent reading financial documents that qualified accountants had found challenging. I thought about the tax audit I had managed in 2011 that saved the company from a significant penalty. I thought about the time I had discovered a $600,000 discrepancy in a contractor's billing and had presented it, calmly and with complete documentation, to a room of 12 men who had expected me to miss it. One morning, I moved the Easy Phone to the drawer. In its place, I put my actual phone with the App Store open. I downloaded the Building Management app. I downloaded 2 community organization apps that I had read about in an article. I found the building's formal residents association registration, which had lapsed in 2017 and which technically still existed as a legal entity but had not held a meeting since. And I read its bylaws. I read the bylaws twice. There was a section about elections. Michael started receiving messages from neighbors in the 3rd week. Your mom is really something. Did your mother fix the elevator button on the fourth floor? The one that's been stuck for 6 months? Дорогой Michael, это твоя мать написала. The philosophical smell in hallway 3B has been identified as a fermentation hobby in apartment 3F. The resident has been spoken to kindly and has agreed to relocate operations to a ventilated space. Потому что это гениально. The philosophical smell had indeed been traced to a man named Bernard on the 3rd floor who was making his own cheese and had accidentally sealed the ventilation. I had worked this out through a process of elimination and 2 very careful conversations, neither of which had involved any accusation or embarrassment. Bernard was extremely apologetic and also very generous. He gave me a portion of the finished cheese, which was excellent, and I shared it with Ella and Precedent, though Precedent was only allowed to smell it because of dietary restrictions. Michael showed me the messages one evening at dinner. People seem to like you. That's nice. The elevator button. How did you do that? I submitted a maintenance request with the specific button code and the date it was first reported. Management companies respond faster when you give them a reference number. It takes the ambiguity out. He looked at me for a moment. I do communications for a living, he said, slowly. I know. I've lived here for a year. I know. I've never once called the management company. I know. He picked up his fork. He put it down again. Mom, why didn't you do any of this before? You've been here for 7 years. Nobody asked. And I didn't have the Wi-Fi password. He was quiet for the rest of dinner. Christina talked about something at her office. I listened and made appropriate responses and did not say anything else about it. That night, I went to my room and opened the Residents Association bylaws again and read the section about elections for the 4th time. The annual meeting was in 6 weeks. The important phone, the easy phone, made one more appearance. It was a Sunday morning, and Michael had his colleagues over again, the same 4 from the barbecue, for what he called a casual brunch, and which Christina had been preparing for since Friday. I made coffee and offered to help and was thanked and redirected to the living room in a way that was very smooth and very final. I sat in the living room. I could hear them in the kitchen. I was not trying to listen. But the kitchen is not far from the living room in my house, and the walls are the original ones from 1963, which were built for aesthetics rather than sound insulation. Sophie's voice. Your mom seems to be doing well. She was so quiet last time. Christina's voice. She's adjusting. Michael bought her this amazing senior phone. It has a big screen and an emergency button. She actually uses it now. She didn't know I hadn't touched it. She had seen the box moved from the table and assumed. Michael's voice, quieter. She's actually gotten pretty into this building chat thing. It's kind of sweet. Oh, that's adorable. My grandmother does crosswords. Is she okay on her own, like cognitively? A beat. Oh, totally. She's sharp. Just, different world. Different world. I picked up my actual phone. I opened the chat. There was a message from Gerald asking for support in a dispute about the laundry room scheduling. I drafted a response that proposed a 3-week rotation system with a dispute resolution process. I sent it. I put the phone down. I went in for coffee when it was ready. I sat at the table with them, and I was pleasant, and I listened to them talk about their industry, and I said nothing of any consequence. But I had already submitted my candidacy for the Residents Association election. I had done it quietly, the way I did most things, by reading the form carefully, filling it in correctly, and mailing it before anyone thought to ask. Michael announced his own candidacy on a Tuesday evening. He came to dinner in a good mood, the particular good mood of someone who has made a decision that feels right and wants to share it. He poured himself a glass of wine and sat down and said, I've been thinking. The building really needs someone to get the Residents Association going again. It's been dead for years, and I think I could actually do something useful there. Networking, community building, communication strategy. It's literally my job. Christina said that sounded wonderful. She said it immediately, the way people do when they've already discussed something, and this is the public announcement. I'm going to post in the chat tonight, he said. Make it official. That's a good idea, I said. He posted that evening. It was a well-written post, clear, friendly, professional. He introduced himself, described his background in communications, outlined 3 things he hoped to improve in the building. Several people responded positively. Gerald wrote, "Welcome to the arena, Michael," in full capitals, which Michael seemed to find encouraging. I was not sure Michael had fully understood Gerald yet. I did not say anything in the chat that evening. I was reading the bylaws again, specifically the section on existing registrations and their effect on candidacy requirements. The Residents Association, even in its lapsed state, was still a registered legal entity. As a registered member, which I was, having been listed as a resident since the building's last formal roll was taken in 2018, I was technically an incumbent, which meant I could stand for re-election under the simplified process, which required no additional signatures or submissions. I had already submitted my form. It had been received. I mentioned this to nobody. The week before the meeting, the building chat had its most active period since I had joined it. Gerald posted a formal declaration of support for Dorothy Harper's remarkable stewardship of this building's collective well-being that ran to 412 words and included a numbered list of things I had accomplished. I had not asked him to do this. I was not sure it was strictly helpful, but it was extremely thorough, and several people replied with photographs of the fixed elevator button and the restored gate and the hallway that no longer smelled like fermentation, and someone created a small graphic that said, "Dorothy for building," with a tiny wrench emoji that I thought was very creative. Michael saw all of this. I could tell because he got quieter over dinner in a way that was different from his usual quiet. It was the quiet of someone processing new information. On Thursday, he said, "Mom, are you running for the Residents Association?" "The election is Sunday." "That's not an answer." "No, it is. The election is Sunday. You should come. It's in the common room at 2:00. He looked at me for a long moment. "Did you submit a candidacy form?" "I filled out the paperwork that was required." "When?" "About 3 weeks ago." The silence lasted long enough that Christina looked up from her phone. "Before I announced." "Yes." "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" I thought about this genuinely because it was a fair question and deserved an honest answer. "Because," I said, "you didn't ask me." The common room held approximately 60 people and smelled, pleasantly, of the coffee that someone had set up on a folding table near the door. Ella was already there when I arrived, with precedent on a lead and a canvas bag that appeared to contain a small, celebratory item of some kind. Gerald was in the 3rd row with a notepad. David from 407 was in the back, and he waved when he saw me, which I found touching given our history. Michael arrived with Christina at 1:55. He was wearing a jacket. He had, I noticed, printed materials, a single-page summary of his plans for the association. It was a good document. He had clearly spent time on it. He saw me across the room. I gave him a small wave. He gave me a look that contained several emotions I recognized, and 2 that I didn't, then went to stand near the front. The meeting was run by a man named Howard, who was 73 and had been the association's nominal chair since its last active period, and who seemed pleasantly surprised to be needed again. He called the meeting to order. He explained the process. He introduced the two candidates. Michael went first. He spoke well, clear, confident, warm. He described his background. He outlined his proposals: a digital communication system, a monthly newsletter, a formal channel for maintenance requests. It was excellent. It was, I thought, exactly what someone with his skills would produce. The room listened politely. Several people nodded. Then it was my turn. I didn't have printed materials. I didn't have proposals. I said, "I'm Dorothy Harper. I live in apartment 212, and I've been in this building for 7 years. I'm a retired accountant. Over the last 3 months, I've helped fix the water pressure on the second floor, get the parking gate repaired, resolve the fire exit situation, identify what was happening in the third floor hallway, and get the elevator button on 4 working again. I did all of this by reading the existing documents carefully and making phone calls. I don't have a communication strategy. I have Patricia's direct number at the management company, and I know which section of the maintenance agreement to cite when she needs convincing." I paused. "If you want me to chair the association, I'll do it the same way. I'll read things and make calls and keep notes. I'm not exciting, but I'm thorough." I sat down. There was a moment of silence. Then Gerald said at full volume, "Thorough is what we need." The room laughed. The tension broke. Howard called the vote. I received 29 votes. Michael received 11. Ella lifted precedent's paw, and Howard said firmly that animal votes would not be counted. But someone in the back row had already entered 30, including precedent, into the chat, and the emoji was a small dog wearing what appeared to be a judicial collar. Michael walked out without saying anything. Christina walked with him, close, the way people walk when they're trying to hold something together. I stayed to speak with Howard about the transition. Outside, through the common room window, I could see Michael standing by the building entrance. He was not on his phone. He was just standing there, looking at something I couldn't see from where I was. I recognized that expression. I had worn it myself 3 years ago when Harold died, and I had to figure out what the rest of my life was going to look like. It was the expression of someone recalculating. He was waiting in the kitchen when I got home. Christina was not there. She had gone to call her sister, which is what she does when she needs time. Michael was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea, which I recognized as an overture. He had made them using the tea bags I kept in the cabinet that he had always thought was the spice cabinet until I moved things back after Christina rearranged them. I sat down. He pushed a cup toward me. We were quiet for a moment. "I do communications for a living." "I know. I've been in this building for a year. I didn't fix a single thing." "You fixed the kitchen drawer," I said. "The sticky one. That was a year of relief." He almost smiled. Not quite. "Mom, the tribunal post." He picked up his cup. "Was that about me?" I considered this carefully. No, it was about the fire exit. I genuinely wanted the car moved. "And the candidacy?" "That was about me." He looked at the table. "At the barbecue, when I said what I said." "Socially awkward. Doesn't understand modern communication." "Yeah. I spent 32 years reading things other people didn't bother to read and finding the parts that mattered. I don't talk a lot. That's not the same as not understanding." He was quiet for a long time. "I know," he said finally. "I knew it when I said it. I was showing off to my colleagues. You were just there and I used you as a punchline." I had not expected him to say it that clearly. I had expected deflection or at least some gentle rearrangement of the facts. "Yes," I said, "you did. I'm sorry. I know you are." We drank our tea. Outside, someone in the building chat had posted a photograph of the common room after the meeting with the caption, "Democracy is beautiful." And Gerald had replied, "Historic." And Ella had replied, "Precedent says hi." Precedent's name had acquired a new layer of meaning that I thought Harold would have found extremely funny. "What are you actually going to do with the association?" "Fix the rest of the things on Gerald's list," I said. "There are 14 outstanding issues. 4 of them have been pending for over a year. I've already contacted management about 3. "Of course you have." "Michael, you're very good at your job. The post you wrote tonight was excellent. The proposals were thoughtful. But knowing how to talk about communication and actually communicating are not quite the same thing." He looked at me. "That was pointed, Mom." "I've been practicing." He laughed then, a real one, surprised out of him, and something in the room shifted. Not everything, and not back to what it was before, but something. "Can I help? With the association?" "Not as chair, just, I could handle the newsletter, the digital communication stuff." I thought about it. "You'd be reporting to me." "I'm aware." "Gerald will be involved." "How involved?" "Very. He has opinions about everything, and most of them are, on reflection, correct." "Okay." "And you'll read the bylaws." "Mom." "Michael." "Fine, I'll read the bylaws." That was the beginning of something different. Not a reset. There was no going back to before, and I'm not sure before was as good as it seemed at the time anyway. But something different. Something that had at least the right structure. Michael and Christina found their apartment 3 months later. 3rd floor, building 2 streets over. More space, a proper kitchen. Christina came to tell me herself, which I thought took some courage, and she said, "I moved your mugs back before we pack, and the photograph. It's on the bookshelf." I thanked her. I meant it. The photograph was back where it had always been, Harold at the Grand Canyon in 1991, squinting into the sun, looking the way he always looked in photographs, like the world had just said something unexpectedly funny. I stood in the living room and looked at it for a while. Harold would have found this entire story very funny. He would have been particularly delighted by precedent, by Gerald, by the word tribunal, and the fact that it produced 123 responses before 9 in the morning. He would have said, "Dorothy, you've always run things. You just needed a chat." Which is not entirely accurate, but is not entirely wrong either. I am still chair of the Residents Association. We have resolved 11 of the 14 outstanding issues on Gerald's original list. The remaining 3 involve the building's heating system and require the management company to do something that costs money, which means they are progressing at the speed management companies progress when money is involved, which is to say, slowly, but with documentation. Michael handles the newsletter. He is very good at it. He has also, to his credit, read the bylaws. He texted me a photograph of the relevant election section with the annotation, "I see what you did," and I replied with the small wrench emoji, and he sent back a thumbs up, and that was the end of that discussion. Ella and I have tea on Wednesdays now. Precedent attends. He is the official mascot of the association. Not officially, but in the chat it is understood. He won the photogenic dog vote again this year by an even larger margin. I believe he is aware of his status. Gerald remains Gerald. He is exactly what he appears to be. which is a person with strong feelings and a large heart, and a tendency to use capital letters in moments of emotion. He has become, without either of us quite planning it, something like a friend. He is teaching me about community radio, which is his other area of strong feelings. I am teaching him about the maintenance agreement, which he is finding unexpectedly riveting. The easy phone is still in the drawer. I have not opened it. I have considered donating it, but something makes me keep it there. A reminder, perhaps, of what other people assume until you show them differently. A few weeks ago, Sophie, Michael's colleague from the barbecue, ran into me at the mailboxes. She had moved into the building 2 months earlier, which I had not known until I saw her name on a new residence form that came through the association. She recognized me. She looked briefly uncertain in the way people do when they meet someone in a different context than expected. "Oh, Dorothy, right. You run the building association?" "I chair it, yes." "I heard about the parking tribunal," she said, and her voice had shifted from the tone she'd used at the barbecue to something more straightforward. That was actually brilliant strategy. The public accountability angle? I was just trying to move a car. "I know, but the way you framed it, the community witness element, the formal language making it feel official, the humor taking the edge off the confrontation, that's textbook conflict de-escalation. Where did you learn that?" I thought about 32 years of boardrooms, about tax inspectors and contractors and men who had expected me to miss things. Practice, mostly. She nodded slowly. She was looking at me the way people look at something they thought they understood and have just realized they didn't. "Michael said you were socially awkward?" I said pleasantly.
A pause. "He mentioned it. I don't think he'd say that now."
"Probably not." We stood at the mailboxes for a moment. "If you ever want to talk about the association," she said, "I'm in 403. I work in communications. I might actually be useful." "I know what you do. I read the new residence forms carefully." She blinked. "Of course you do." I took my mail. I went upstairs. In the chat that evening, Gerald posted, "Reminder, Dorothy is still here and still thorough," and 17 people put the small fire emoji, and Ella put the dachshund, and I put nothing at all, because some things don't need a response. They just need to be true.